Let me ruin your belief in happy endings. Imagine warning your wife not to go out with a coworker. Not because you are jealous, but because you see red flags everywhere. She laughs, calls you insecure, walks out anyway. Hours pass, midnight, 1, 2. You open Instagram and there she is. Arm around him, shot glass in hand, wedding ring gone. She captions it, "No stress, no rules." That is the moment a marriage flatlines. But instead of begging, he went silent. Cold, tactical. Evidence saved, money moved, lawyers contacted. And later, he walked into that same bar, placed the photos on the counter, and ended the marriage in front of everyone. You want to know how she reacted? Watch carefully. The house had never felt this quiet, not even during deployments when Jonathan Briggs would come home from training exhausted, drop his duffel bag by the door, and sleep with one ear open like every former Marine does. But tonight was different. This was not silence born from discipline or habit. This was the kind of quiet that bleeds into the walls, that settles into bone, that reminds a man he is alone even when the house is still full of the woman he married. It was 2:03 a.m. Jonathan sat on the edge of the living room sofa, shoulders square, hands steady in that frightening way only calm men can be when they are breaking. The glow of his iPhone lit his face with cold blue light. The screen refreshed again. Another Instagram story. Another 30 seconds of proof he did not ask for. There she was, Melissa, his wife of 5 years. Black dress, cropped denim jacket, hair curled the way she only did on special occasions. She was laughing at something the man beside her said. Jonathan knew his name without needing the tag. Eric, co-worker. The one she said was harmless. The one she said was just fun to talk to. The one Jonathan tried to trust because marriage requires a little faith even when the gut screams otherwise. Jonathan watched the short clip again. Melissa leaned into Eric, fingers brushing his arm lightly. Not an accident. Not a friendly gesture. It was intimate, familiar. The camera panned across neon lights, glass rims wet with condensation, people dancing behind them. A bar in East Austin, the kind of place with craft bourbon menus and Edison bulbs hanging low like warm reminders of a younger life. Melissa loved spots like that. Jonathan preferred quiet bars where conversations mattered more than music. He learned to adapt for her. Tonight, she adapted for someone else. The corner of his screen showed what hurt worse than the touch. Worse than the flirting. Worse than the fact she ignored his warning before she left the house. No ring. Her left hand wrapped around a drink, nails red, skin glowing under bar lights. Bare. Jonathan inhaled once. Long. Controlled. The same way he used to when preparing a breaching charge or steadying a rifle at the range. Slow breathing keeps the mind from collapsing. Marines learn that early. Civilians rarely understand. On the coffee table in front of him sat a small box wrapped in matte navy paper. Not flashy, not extravagant. Simple, meaningful, like he was. Inside, it was a pendant engraved with their wedding date. A gift he planned to give her tomorrow night at dinner. Their anniversary. 5 years. 5 years of shared rent, shared holidays, shared mornings brushing teeth at the same sink. 5 years believing they were building something together. A home, a future, a family maybe. Jonathan was not naive. Marriage is not bliss every day, but betrayal should never come disguised as celebration. Another story loaded. Melissa holding up 2 fingers, smiling wide. Eric's face half in the frame behind her, cheek brushing hers. Text overlay. Living my life tonight, no stress, no limits. No mention of Jonathan, no trace that she was married at all. Something inside him did not explode. It froze. The kind of silence that follows a gunshot on the range, when everyone waits to see if the target falls. His heart did not race. It slowed, like stepping into cold water. Pain became precise, sharp, focused. Jonathan was a cybersecurity engineer now. Discipline, logic, evidence were his weapons. The moment he saw the bare hand, the missing ring, the problem became one thing. Breach detected. On the far side of the room, the digital clock blinked 2:07 a.m. in soft red. Jonathan put the phone down gently beside the gift box. His wedding photo on the wall watched him like a witness sworn to silence. Melissa's laughter kept looping in his mind like glitch data repeating until the system snaps. He leaned back in the sofa, eyes on the ceiling, jaw locked so hard a muscle twitched near his temple. He did not cry. He did not shout. His voice, when he finally spoke aloud to no one, was barely louder than breath. She made her choice. Outside, a distant car passed through the deserted street. The refrigerator hummed. Life continued, unaware that a marriage was bleeding quietly in a beige living room in Texas. Jonathan exhaled through his nose, slow, measured, as if stabilizing his aim. The hurt did not fade. It crystallized. A violation does not always announce itself with chaos. Sometimes it arrives through a phone screen at 2 a.m. wearing a smile. And a man who freezes like that is not weak. He is recalibrating. He is preparing. Jonathan Briggs was not the kind of man who needed fireworks to feel alive. Routine suited him. Stability calmed him. Building things that lasted. Bridges, code, marriages, that was where he found meaning. After leaving the Marine Corps, he earned his engineering degree on the GI Bill, worked his way into cybersecurity infrastructure for a contractor in Austin. Precision, protocols, integrity, words that shaped him. Melissa used to say she loved that about him. She met him at a 4th of July barbecue hosted by mutual friends. He remembered her as sunlight in human form. Loud laugh, hair flying in the Texas wind, a woman who danced on grass without music. Jonathan, beer in hand, simply watched her. She walked over first, asked if he had a lighter. He did not smoke, but he handed her a matchbook someone left behind. She smiled like he had given her a gift. They fell in love the way good things usually begin, slowly, honestly, without suspicion. Their early years were built on small routines. Sunday morning pancakes, late-night drives in his old Chevy, movies on the couch where Melissa would fall asleep with her head on his chest before the third act. It was not dramatic. It was peaceful. But peace, Jonathan later learned, can be fragile when one person needs noise to feel seen. Melissa was a first-grade teacher, adored by students and parents alike. She needed praise the way flowers need sunlight. Compliments made her glow. When the pandemic ended and bars reopened, she rediscovered social life like oxygen. Jonathan, used to structure, sometimes preferred to stay home after long hours working penetration tests, scanning for vulnerabilities in corporate firewalls. Melissa called him boring, with a laugh that was half play, half truth. He ignored the sting. The first crack appeared subtly. A new coworker named Eric. Younger, gym-toned, the type who wore rolled sleeves and called everyone buddy. Jonathan met him once at a school fundraiser. Eric shook Jonathan's hand too confidently, the kind of handshake that wants to establish territory. Jonathan noticed Melissa's cheeks flush when Eric complimented her dress. Not jealousy, just awareness. A small red flag, folded neatly, tucked away. Weeks later, Jonathan would hear Melissa giggling in the kitchen at midnight, phone lighting her face. He asked who she was talking to. "Just colleagues planning a field trip," she said, casual, dismissive. "You worry too much." Another night, she turned her phone face down when he approached. Tiny things, glitches in the system. If Jonathan saw discrepancies in access logs like that at work, he would investigate. But marriages were not networks. He wanted to trust her. Still, late-night notifications increased. She started dressing up more for work. A new perfume, something floral, sharper than the vanilla scent she used for years. Jonathan smelled it first on her collar when she hugged him, like evidence only men in denial pretend not to see. When he asked her about Eric directly, she rolled her eyes. "You sound insecure," she said. "He is just a friend. Are you going to interrogate every male who talks to me?" He backed off. Marines learn discipline, but they also learn restraint. Pick battles wisely. Do not fire until the target is confirmed. But confirmation arrived not in explosions, in accumulation. Coffee receipts from downtown even though her school was north. A weekend teacher conference she attended without photos or details. A new habit of showering immediately when she got home, like washing off another world before stepping into Jonathan's. Red flags multiplied like corrupted packets flooding a server. The night she first mentioned going to that bar, the same bar from the photos, Jonathan offered to join her. She said it was just co-workers and she did not want him to feel out of place. It sounded innocent. It felt exclusionary. Still, he kissed her forehead and told her to have fun. Trust is not blind, it is a choice. But choices become heavier when one person starts making them alone. And Jonathan, even then, sensed the shift. Melissa glowing brighter around others while dimming slowly beside the man who once steadied her world. A storm does not begin with thunder. It begins with a breeze that no one takes seriously. Jonathan took that breeze seriously, just not soon enough. The fight did not start loud. Good marriages rarely explode without warning. They fracture quietly, like stress lines in concrete that only reveal their danger under weight. It was Friday evening, the air outside thick with the lingering heat of late summer in Austin. Jonathan came home from work earlier than usual, a bouquet of white lilies in hand, Melissa's favorite. Tomorrow was their anniversary. He imagined cooking dinner, opening a bottle of wine they had been saving. Maybe talking about a future trip, something tender, something normal. Melissa was standing at the mirror, applying lipstick with precision. A new shade, deeper, bolder. Her hair curled in a way Jonathan had only seen on rare occasions, usually when she wanted attention rather than affection. "You look nice," Jonathan said, placing the lilies gently into a glass vase on the kitchen island. "Special night?" She did not look back, only kept applying lipstick, eyes focused on her reflection. "My co-workers are going for drinks downtown," she replied. "It has been stressful at school. I need a night out." Jonathan's jaw tightened, just slightly, barely visible. "I thought we were celebrating tomorrow," he reminded her. No accusation, just fact. She shrugged. "I will not be gone long." A pause stretched between them, thin but sharp enough to cut. "Is Eric going?" Jonathan asked. Melissa turned then, slowly, as if the question itself offended her. "Why does it matter?" she said. "You're acting jealous again." "I am asking," he answered, voice calm, measured like debriefing tone after a mission. "Last time you went, you came home at 2 a.m, no texts, no call. I am not comfortable with it, Melissa." She let out a breath, not of understanding but impatience. "You cannot control who I am friends with. You think every man is a threat." Jonathan stepped closer, the space between them suddenly tight. "I am not asking you to cut people off. I am asking you to consider how it looks, how it feels." His voice stayed low, controlled, the kind of calm that is more frightening than shouting. "Please stay home tonight, for us." For a second, her face softened. For a second, he thought he reached her. Then she grabbed her purse. "I need to live my life," she said. "You are suffocating me with this insecurity." Insecurity. The word hit harder than accusation. Jonathan, trained to read patterns and threats, was being painted as unstable for noticing anomalies. Gaslight wrapped in affection. He stood still as she walked past him, the smell of perfume like a trail of burning fuse. "Do not wait up," she said, hand already on the door. Jonathan reached out, not to stop her, but to call her back with the only weapon he thought might matter. "Melissa," he said quietly, "I am warning you. This is crossing a line." She looked over her shoulder, eyes cold with something he had not seen before. Then, maybe the line is the problem. The door shut. Silence returned, heavy as a locked vault. Jonathan stood there, flowers behind him, anniversary card still blank. The house felt too clean, too organized, like a system waiting for a breach. He poured a drink, sat on the couch and waited. Every hour deepened the sense of loss the way water soaks into wood until it swells and cracks. At 10 p.m. he checked his phone. No messages. Midnight. Nothing. He kept replaying her last words, the dismissal, the way she chose freedom over reassurance. He told himself she would come home soon, that maybe he was overthinking, that trust required patience. But trust without reciprocity is not trust. It is self-deception. Then, vibration. Not a text, a notification. Instagram. Jonathan opened it with the same steadiness he used when reviewing security footage of intrusion attempts. Cold, clinical. The first story was Melissa laughing. Drink raised, arm brushing Eric's. The bartender passed them shots. Their faces glowed under neon like they lived in a world that did not include Jonathan. Swipe. Melissa dancing in a crowd, eyes closed, hair wild, the way she used to dance for him. But tonight she danced for someone else. Swipe. Melissa leaning into Eric for a picture. Eric's hand low on her waist. Caption. No stress, no rules. And there it was again. The bare hand, the missing ring. His heart registered it like an alarm code. Breach confirmed. Jonathan sat very still, breathing slow and deep, the way a man breathes before pulling a trigger. The hurt was not loud, it was surgical, clean-cut, a line severed. Hope thinned into dread. Dread sharpened into clarity. And clarity was cold. The third story hit harder than the first two, not because of the laughter or the way Eric leaned in, but because this one was deliberate. Melissa lifted her left hand high in the frame, a fresh cocktail in her grip, glittering nails tapping against the glass. The camera caught her bare ring finger perfectly. Sharp focus. Intentional. As if she wanted the world to know she was unclaimed. No wedding band. No trace of Jonathan. Like she scrubbed him out of her life for one night of adrenaline. He stared at the image, thumb hovering over the screen. His heartbeat did not race. His breathing did not falter. Something deeper shifted. A silent internal click, like a safety being switched off. Pain drained out of him the way power bleeds from a device after the cord is cut. What remained was not heartbreak. It was clarity, cold and operational. Jonathan stood, walked into the bedroom, and opened the small lockbox he kept in the closet. Inside were documents, savings ledgers, copies of their mortgage, life insurance, joint account statements. Most husbands store memories. Jonathan stored contingencies. His father once told him, "A man does not prepare for disaster because he expects it. He prepares because he respects how fast trust can fail." Jonathan never understood the weight of that sentence until now. He pulled out a portable drive, military-grade encryption, AES 256, anti-tamper, plugged it into his laptop and opened a new folder. evidence. He saved every story one by one, slow and methodical. Screenshots, videos, timestamps. Melissa's hand on Eric's chest, Eric pouring tequila into Melissa's mouth. Melissa blowing a kiss toward the camera like a woman who forgot she promised forever to someone else. He tagged each file like case material, not angry, not emotional, just tracking the breach. A cybersecurity audit of his own marriage. The house creaked as he worked, old hardwood settling under night humidity. Outside, cicadas buzzed like distant static. He could hear Melissa's laugh echoing from his phone, replaying itself each time he saved a clip. It did not stab him anymore. It fueled him. Every giggle was another line of code pushing him toward a conclusion only one answer fit. He checked bank apps next, transferred half their joint funds to a separate account under his name, legally permitted, strategically sound. He opened browser tabs for family law firms. He had friends in finance, former Marines who owed him favors. Information is power. Timing is a weapon. Jonathan poured another drink, whiskey neat, and sat back in his chair. He watched Melissa through his screen like surveillance footage. At 1:14 a.m., she posted a final clip, her dancing on a table with two girlfriends, lights flashing blue and red like police sirens. Eric's hands were on her hips from behind. Melissa threw her head back, laughing, free, reckless. She looked nothing like the woman who once cried in his arms when her mother died. She looked like someone who forgot who held her up through grief. He muted the phone and set it face down. Then he sat in silence. A powerful, dangerous silence. Not the silence of fear, the silence of calculation. He thought about confronting her tonight, driving to the bar, walking in, making a scene, but that would give her power. Emotions exposed, weakness displayed. Jonathan did not fight fire with fire. He fought with intelligence, precision, timing. He would not break, he would dismantle, piece by piece. He opened a note file and typed 3 words across the top. She chose this. Below it, he wrote a list, names, attorneys, assets, dates. Calm handwriting, no shaking. A man drafting a plan, not reacting to pain. His phone lit up again, Melissa's newest post. A boomerang of her taking a shot with Eric. Her caption, Wild Nights. Boring husbands, Jonathan felt nothing. The love he once carried like armor simply set itself down. Not shattered, placed aside like gear no longer required. The kind of goodbye only a silent mind can make without ceremony. He closed the laptop. Tomorrow would not be an anniversary. It would be an extraction. And Melissa, whether she knew it yet or not, would remember that night not as freedom, but as the moment she severed her lifeline to the only man who ever stood steady for her. Jonathan exhaled once more, long and level. The break was complete. He was done hurting. Now he would begin to act. Morning arrived without Melissa in the bed beside him. Jonathan woke at 6:12 a.m., not from sleep, but from a long, quiet vigil stretched through the night. He had not closed his eyes once. His body rested, but his mind worked like a server humming under load, calculating, optimizing, preparing. By the time sunlight slipped through the blinds, he had a plan. He shaved carefully, put on a crisp collared shirt, and brewed coffee strong enough to cut through the remnants of exhaustion. The house smelled of roasted beans and lilies, a cruel reminder of what today was supposed to be, their anniversary. Instead, it would become something else entirely. At 7:03 a.m., Melissa stumbled through the front door. Mascara smudged, hair tangled from sleep she took in someone else's world. She froze when she saw Jonathan sitting at the dining table, sipping coffee like a man who had been waiting for confirmation, not answers. "You are up early," she muttered. trying to sound casual, but her voice carried the tremor of guilt. He nodded once. Early enough. She noticed the laptop open, files displayed neatly, photos, videos, timestamps, geotags. Her face paled, but Jonathan did not raise his voice. There was no anger left to express, only consequence. "I am taking the rest of the day off," she said hurriedly, heading for the shower. "We can talk after I clean up." Jonathan did not respond. He simply watched her disappear down the hall, then closed the laptop and slid it into his briefcase. He would not argue. He would not beg. He would simply proceed. At 9 a.m. sharp, he sat in a leather office chair across from attorney Dana Holloway, a sharp woman with the calmness of someone who had watched marriages collapse 100 times and understood that silence often speaks louder than pain. Jonathan placed the drive on her desk. "This is everything," he said. "I want to file." Dana opened the videos, her expression shifting from neutral to clinical. "This will hold up. You protected yourself well." "Evidence is only useful when preserved," Jonathan replied, tone flat, almost military. They discussed property division, joint accounts, the house. Texas law could be brutal to the unprepared, but Jonathan walked in not as a heartbroken husband, but as a man executing a mission. He signed the initial paperwork, set a meeting for Monday, and shook Dana's hand with steady resolve. Next, he made a call. Block number, voice steady. "Good morning," he said to the school district's compliance office. "I am calling regarding a potential ethics violation between 2 faculty members at Oakview Elementary." He knew anonymous reports triggered mandatory review. He did not embellish. He only described what was true. Off-duty drinking between a teacher and a male co-worker, physical contact, social media evidence. Enough to raise flags. Not enough to accuse without fact. He was careful, measured, ethical, as if filing a vulnerability report after detecting unauthorized access. Melissa would not lose her job today, but the board would start watching. And Eric, with his casual arrogance, would feel pressure like a firewall tightening. Jonathan's final step was financial. At home, he opened joint accounts, moving funds into protected assets tied to his veteran status. Less accessible, legally shielded. He changed passwords, activated 2-factor authentication, revoked shared access. Every click was a stitch in the closing wound. At noon, Melissa emerged from the bedroom, showered, hair neatly brushed, wearing a soft sweater that once meant comfort. She forced a smile. "How about we go to dinner tonight?" she asked gently. "Celebrate. Us." Jonathan looked at her as if through glass, present but unreachable. "There is no us to celebrate," he said quietly. She blinked, confusion flickering into panic. "Jonathan, it was just one night. I was drunk. I did not mean—" He slid a folder across the table. Evidence, dated, printed, organized. Her breath stalled. She looked at him like he was a stranger, but Jonathan only saw the truth clearly now. He had loved a memory, not the woman standing here. "No yelling?" she whispered. "What for?" His voice was level, terrifying in its calm. "You made your choice. I am making mine." Her eyes filled, hands trembling, but Jonathan turned away, picking up his keys. "We will talk with the lawyer Monday." Melissa collapsed onto the chair he had sat in earlier, staring at the screen still open to her own smiling face beside another man. Jonathan walked out the door. Not angry, not broken, just done. The betrayal was complete, but revenge was still unfolding. The days that followed did not explode, they decayed. Decay is slower than destruction, quieter than screaming, but far more painful. It happens when love still exists in muscle memory, but trust has already died. Jonathan moved through the house like a shadow with a pulse, present but unreachable. Melissa tried to act as though the weekend had been a speed bump, not a fault line. She woke late the next morning, head pounding. The smell of coffee filled the kitchen, but Jonathan did not hand her a mug like he used to. He sat at the table reading work documents, posture military straight, gaze fixed as though she was not there at all. Melissa hesitated in the doorway. "Morning," she whispered. He looked up once. "Morning." Not cold, not angry, just neutral, which hurt far more. She waited for him to bring it up, to argue, to cry, but Jonathan's silence was absolute, the kind of silence that suggests judgment has already been passed. She sat across from him, hands wrapped around the cup she poured herself. The sleeves of her sweater swallowed her fingers like she was suddenly smaller than before. "You know I love you," she said, voice low, shaky. "I just got carried away." Jonathan turned a page. "You said it was just co-workers. I know. You said I was jealous for no reason. I was wrong. You took off your ring." She looked down. "I do not remember doing that." "You seem to remember the camera." The sentence landed like glass breaking quietly across marble. Melissa swallowed the explanation she had prepared. Because excuses sound childish when spoken to a man who is no longer begging for them. In the evenings, Jonathan came home from work on time, cooked simple meals, washed his own dishes. He no longer waited for her to join him. He no longer asked where she was going or when she would return. Freedom, when granted after betrayal, feels less like permission and more like abandonment. Melissa began texting more, calling during his lunch break, asking if they could talk. Jonathan responded with courtesy, never warmth. "We can talk Monday at the attorney's office." Her heart stuttered every time he repeated it. On Wednesday, she returned from school to find him sitting on the porch, laptop open, typing lines of code with surgical precision. His ring was still on. Hers remained on the bedroom dresser where she had forgotten it days ago. "You look tired," she said, trying to bridge the gulf. He closed the laptop calmly. "Are you attending the meeting on Monday?" She exhaled shakily. "Jonathan, please. I made a mistake. I was drunk, stupid. You are my husband. We can fix this. Just tell me what to do." He looked at her then, really looked, and she saw something worse than anger in his eyes, detachment, as if he was studying an old photograph of a life that no longer belonged to him. "You should open your email," he said quietly. Melissa frowned, but pulled out her phone. Notification. One new message. Subject: divorce. Consultation and filing notice. Her breath collapsed in her chest. The world shrank to the size of that small screen. She read it twice, then a third time, hope dissolving in real time. "No," she whispered. "Jonathan, no. You did not. You cannot. Please." Tears spilled fast, uncontrolled. She reached for him, but he leaned back, not aggressively, just far enough to make the distance unmistakable. "You did not lose me when you kissed him," Jonathan said. "You lost me when you looked happy doing it." Melissa covered her face, sobbing like a confession. The neighbors might have heard, but Jonathan did not move, did not touch her, did not offer comfort. His calmness chilled more than shouting ever could. Days continued with the rhythm of a house preparing for dismantling. She lingered around him in the kitchen, desperate for scraps of warmth. He gave none. Every interaction was polite, like speaking to a stranger renting the other half of the home. On Friday, her school's HR department requested a private meeting about professional conduct. Melissa sat in her car afterward, hands shaking on the wheel, unaware of how the anonymous report had been worded, only that eyes were now watching. Her double life, carefree at night, committed by day, had collided. and the fallout was only beginning. The lawyer's appointment confirmed what Melissa feared, but hoped to undo. The divorce was moving. Jonathan said little during the meeting. He only answered questions, signed papers, and watched Melissa with eyes that once held love, but now reflected only finality. The lawyer asked if they wanted mediation. Jonathan replied first. "No, we are closing this clean." Melissa looked at him as if the floor had shifted beneath her feet. "Jonathan, please." He stood, gathering the folder with precision. "Tonight, we finish this conversation." The words hung cold in the room like a verdict. That evening, he drove to the same bar, the one from the videos. Neon lights flickered against wet pavement, music thumping through brick like a heartbeat he no longer felt. Jonathan parked across the street, watching the door where Melissa had walked into freedom 10 nights ago. Tonight, she was arriving not for celebration, but reckoning. She came at 7:42 p.m., wearing a simple dress, hair straight, face bare of makeup. Not glamorous like the nights with Eric, human, frightened. She saw Jonathan sitting at the bar, alone, whiskey beside him, and took a breath like someone preparing for surgery without anesthesia. She approached slowly. "You chose this place." "I did," he answered. "Why here?" He looked around, couples laughing, friends toasting pints, televisions showing muted baseball highlights, normal life happening while their marriage died in plain air. "Because you ended our marriage here," he said softly. "So it is only fair we bury it where you left it." Melissa's knees nearly buckled. She slid onto the stool beside him, fingers trembling against the edge of the bar. "Jonathan, please. I made a terrible mistake. I was stupid, reckless." He reached into his briefcase and placed a folder between them. Not thrown, not slammed. Set down the way one might place evidence in front of a judge. Inside, printed screenshots, video stills, bank statements, attorney documents, timeline logs, everything organized, highlighted, time-stamped like an after-action report in military brief. He flipped open the first page. A photo of her leaning on Eric's shoulder, the ring missing. Jonathan tapped the date with his finger. 2 hours after you told me you just needed space," he said. "This is when you took off your ring." Melissa's breath fractured. "I did not know what I was thinking." He turned the page, a video of her taking a shot from Eric's hand. "You knew enough to post this for everyone except me." Page after page. Evidence layered like shrapnel. Customers nearby began glancing, not openly staring, but aware that something personal, something heavy was happening inches from spilled beer and worn bar stools. Melissa reached out as if to close the folder, but Jonathan gently stopped her hand with one finger. No force, just boundary. "You do not get to hide from the truth," he said. Tears filled her eyes, thick and hot. "I want to fix this. I will go to counseling. I will quit the job. I will block him. I will do anything." Jonathan studied her like analyzing a compromised system, determining if repair is viable or if replacement is necessary. "I believe you," he said. A flicker of hope crossed her face. He continued, "But I no longer love the woman who is saying it." Hope died as fast as it came. She covered her mouth, a sob escaping like something she had been holding too long. Jonathan's voice remained even, calm, measured, final. "The marriage ends tonight." Melissa shook her head violently. "No, please. We can rebuild. We can—" Customers pretended not to watch, but everyone felt the air change, like a storm rolling in silently. A bartender paused mid-pour. Jonathan closed the folder, slid it back into the briefcase, and stood. "You burned the house," he said, "then asked me to live in the ashes. Melissa reached for him, gripping his wrist like a drowning woman grabbing driftwood. "Do not leave. Do not walk out on us." He gently removed her hand, not harshly, but with the certainty of a man removing the last thread tying him to pain. "There is no us," he said, "only memories of what we were." He turned and walked to the door while Melissa remained on the stool, crying into both hands as strangers witnessed a heart fracture in real time. Her sobs echoed across the bar like broken music. Jonathan pushed open the door, cool night air washing over him. It did not feel like escape, it felt like release. And as he stepped into the street, leaving behind the place where trust died, he did not look back. Not once. The divorce took 3 weeks. No courtroom battles, no shouting across conference tables. Jonathan signed the final papers with the same steady hand he used to sign enlistment forms years ago. A signature shaped by discipline, not emotion. Melissa's hand shook beside his, mascara smearing each time she wiped her face with the back of her wrist. Every movement of her pen looked like regret struggling to hold itself together. She tried to speak once, a whisper, a plea, but Jonathan raised his hand gently, not in anger, just a quiet boundary. "There is nothing left to explain," he said. "We are closing the file." The clerk notarized the documents. 2 lives that once shared keys, holidays, hopes, now separated by ink. The moment it was done, Melissa's breath shattered into her palms. Jonathan thanked the clerk, stood, and walked out into crisp afternoon sun like a man stepping from a cave, into weather he could finally feel again. No final hug, no final words. Some endings do not need ceremony. 2 months later, autumn rolled across the country in copper and gold. Jonathan packed his truck for a long drive. Duffel bag, camera, thermos of black coffee. His wedding ring rested at the bottom of a drawer back home, silent as a folded flag. He closed the apartment door behind him, locking it with a click that sounded less like goodbye and more like beginning. He drove northwest toward Colorado, windows down, music low, wind unspooling old memories like a thread finally breaking free. The road stretched ahead in wide American silence, mountains rising in the distance like a promise. He passed fields, gas stations, diners glowing neon at dusk. Not running. Traveling. Some journeys start when love ends. He pulled into a scenic overlook near Estes Park just as the sun slid behind the Rockies, painting the sky in bruised purple and molten orange. Jonathan stepped out, breath visible in cold air. For the first time in years, he felt light. He sat on the tailgate of his truck with a blanket, sipping warm coffee as the world quieted around him. No notifications, no tension in his chest, only the distant call of an eagle and the steady pulse of his own heartbeat. He took a photo of the mountains, not to post, not to prove anything, just to keep. The wind brushed his jacket, cold but welcome, like truth after lies. Jonathan smiled, not wide, just real. The kind of smile a man wears when he knows he has survived something that could have destroyed him if he let it. In a small house back in Austin, Melissa sat cross-legged on the living room floor, the same room where Jonathan once waited at 2 a.m. for a message that never came. Light from the television flickered across her face, but she was not watching. She was scrolling through old photos on her phone. Wedding day, first apartment keys, Christmas mornings with messy hair and cheap ornaments. Jonathan kissing her forehead as snow fell in New York 2 winters ago. Scroll, scroll, scroll. Then she reached the night at the bar, the one that ended everything. Her smile in the photo looked different now. Empty, stupid. Eric was no longer in her life. HR had intervened. Rumors spread. Professionalism questioned. She avoided him in the hall like shame she could not wash off. Friends stopped inviting her to gatherings, their loyalty quietly realigning. She played a video where Jonathan once surprised her with flowers, and she broke, shoulders shaking, hands pressed to her face. The sound of her crying filled the house like something wounded trying to heal too late. She whispered his name like a prayer she no longer had the right to say. Jonathan, hundreds of miles away, stood at the ridge overlooking endless pines. The moon rose slow, silver cutting through thin clouds like forgiveness he owed only to himself. He breathed in, deep and easy. Melissa breathed out, broken and alone. He moved forward. She stayed behind, with the memory of the man she thought would always be there when she came home. But he was not. He walked away quietly, the punishment more devastating than rage. Some people learn too late that silence is the sharpest revenge. And Melissa would remember that night in the bar, his calm voice, his cold evidence, the moment he left, not for days, but for a lifetime. In the end, this was never a story about revenge. It was a story about self-respect. Jonathan did not raise his voice. He did not break things. He did not beg for the woman who chose another life. He simply chose himself. Sometimes love does not end in fire. Sometimes it ends in silence, in a signature, in the quiet realization that walking away is the bravest form of healing. If you have ever stayed longer than you should have, if you have ever been hurt by someone who promised forever, let this story remind you that peace is a victory too. You deserve a life where your heart is handled with care,